various ways. And so I think that that's something that there's not as much of in sort of the old school model for media and entertainment. Mostly our experiences in the past have been passive, and you're just strictly consuming things. But TikTok, honestly, is a great example of really what I think the future is of entertainment, which is gives people the opportunity to do their own things around content that they already enjoy and add their own spin to it or celebrate it with their own content, basically, that they're adding. So I think there's a lot of value to be had for both sides. Both the creators and the audience can gain a lot of value from being given more of these kinds of tools. And then also, as if you're a person who likes to create stuff, you're creating things, and it's possible that you may create things that other people will value. And if you have a very smooth ramp to earning something from that, it could just be something you're earning that's of social value, like social tokens, but you could also conceivably actually earn money, become a creator who earns direct from other consumers, direct from other parties. And it's not like you being beholden to necessarily some big company that's just sort of drip feeding you your benefits from your creations, but instead it's you become a creator and you start publishing things yourself.
Nice. So talking about media, entertainment, and games, your company Pixelinks is focused on blurring the lines between three things: music, blockchain, and gaming. Very interesting concept. Would you be able to let us know a little bit about, what your product is all about?
Sure. So Pixelinks was formed specifically to tackle these kinds of issues. It was founded by deadmau5, also known as Joel Zimmerman, and Richie Houghton, also known as Plastic Man. They are both musicians in mainly the electronic music space, but they saw an opportunity with the blockchain and the sort of discussion around the metaverse, an opportunity to create a space to accomplish a lot of what I've been talking about, which is more direct engagement with their audience, their fans, better access to revenue for any artist, like small artists, small time musicians, getting a better opportunity, more channels to earn for their creations, so that they're not, again, beholden to these really big companies that, especially with the current streaming model, the earnings that artists can obtain are really pretty small, pretty paltry. This was all kind of highlighted by the pandemic, when live events and merchandising really just fell through the floor because nobody was going to concerts and couldn't hold concerts. So suddenly the artists realized that that was the majority of their income. And what they could obtain just through digital distribution was not enough to really, for the vast majority of artists, simply not enough to live off of, not enough to make a living. So the inspiration for those guys was, hey, let's start tackling these problems. And they saw games, which they are both very much into, and their audience tends to be people who are into games. They saw games as an opportunity for distributing their work. They saw the blockchain and NFTs as an opportunity for improving the ownership model, the way that we track rights and royalties and ownership, and facilitating all of those things for the audience as well. UGC, right? Giving them user-generated content opportunities, letting them mint their own things, letting them create things. So that was what the company was founded to chase after, was a Web3 model for music, heavy emphasis on interactable content, heavy emphasis on music with interactivity and music with more than just audio involved. So, like in this slide here, one of the concepts that we'd come up with for our initial product, which we're calling Elixir, is sound sculptures. It's a UGC opportunity. Users can get stems, samples, and loops from libraries that come from these artists that are on the platform, or from, more generic sources that we've licensed that they can now use. The users can play around with actual music creation through tools that we provide that are, hopefully simple enough to use that they have fun doing it. And they create these now audiovisual experiences around music that's built up from pieces that they themselves have acquired from their favorite artists or other sources. And now the user is engaged in creation. Let me talk briefly too about like what the first thing is that we're working on, which is this mobile application. So Elixir Mobile is emphasizing AR. And so that's a big part of what I think the metaverse is in the future as well, which is bringing digital reality into our physical reality and creating more value for the stuff that is being created in media and entertainment in the digital space, bringing it into the physical world alongside us through AR devices to give you more places and opportunities to engage with entertaining content, and also create things that you can put in the world. Have some ownership of the digital presence of things in the world around us, and create this parallel digital space that that exists in our world and is parallel to it. So that's the thing we're chasing right immediately, like in the near future, going to be releasing a mobile product that emphasizes AR experiences based around, largely around music content, but it's audiovisual and it's stuff that you can interact with in AR. And then we give people opportunities to create their own content as well off of the things that they've received. This is just an example here of the music editor. This isn't the editing part of it, but this is building music out of pieces to create music from these small samples and loops. You create a whole musical work off of that. So yeah, these are the things that we're chasing after: is UGC, AR experiences around the things that users and artists have created, interactive experiences, and then ultimately our goal is to put out a PC application alongside that, which also is Elixir branded. And that PC application is going to gradually grow in its feature set to become basically like an MMO for this music universe, for people to engage with as an avatar, digital presence in that world, that they are allowed to interact with music content, interact with these audiovisual experiences, create things of their own along those lines, have shared events. It's a very social space, have shared events with other people, have live events where artists are actually performing that they can engage with online through the Elixir world. So that's our first set of products that we're chasing after.
Very unique concept, honestly. I happen to try a few AR experiences that are there on your website at this point in time. Very interesting and very intriguing. Let's now talk about infrastructure and tech, which is, I'm sure, one of the interesting topics today, because the current average infrastructure that we have today, I'll break it down into two pieces. Let's talk about the internet. For a gamer, for us to run games, you would require a lot of bandwidth. Typical average or poor internet would not work. You won't be able to play online games effectively. So in the case of Metaverse, it is going to be pretty similar, considering we're talking about online spaces, we're talking about 3D models rendering, real time. You will be interacting with other people in the same model. So how are companies planning to, considering that there is an average internet which might not be sufficient enough to run something at that scale? That point number one. And point number two is, I'm drawing in a personal experience here. Earlier, I used to use a MacBook Pro 2015 with i5 processor. Practically speaking, a decent laptop. I was able to run my Xcode without having any issues or other tools. But when I tried to run, Decentraland, one of the Metaverse platforms, my entire laptop hanged. So practically speaking, an average laptop is not able to handle, a web experience per se. So how are companies planning to solve these issues in case if they're trying to get into the mass, expecting a larger user set to start using their platforms? I see these are a major, showstoppers. So how are companies planning to address this?
Well, I think that in the short term, companies can and will start trying to optimize their content and their engines to target less powerful hardware more effectively and to make those experiences better. A decent example of this actually is Fortnite, because Fortnite started out as purely a PC game on Unreal, but they realized, at some point, they really wanted to get more players. They really wanted to increase the reach of the product, and one possible way to do that would be to get it working on mobile. So they chased after that. Obviously, the Unreal Engine already had some history of supporting mobile game creation, but they spent a lot of time and effort on optimizing and figuring out how to get Fortnite to fit on mobile devices. Obviously, it's not going to run on all mobile devices, but as long as you can hit a decent percentage of the market, still it's a big win. And it was a big win for them. That was really how Fortnite blew up and became a multi-billion-dollar proposition, was because they added the mobile experience. And it wasn't, in their case, it wasn't even like a companion app, it was the actual game. So, companies can and they will spend the effort to optimize and target less powerful hardware. It's just a matter of time, I think, and different companies will have different roadmaps and different timelines on which they're able and willing to go after that. Now, there is another approach, and the approach that we're also investigating to sort of determine its current viability for us now. I believe that it's an important part of the future of online worlds, the metaverse, when that is utilizing cloud compute resources to take the bulk of that burden off of the hardware device that the consumer has, and instead do the work in the cloud and stream it to the consumer device. So this is what you see in, for example, Stadia. There's NVIDIA has their, GeForce Now. Microsoft is doing it with Xbox. And then we're partnering with a couple of those, including a new company called Orbit. And Orbit has a similar solution specifically tailored to Unreal. But in all cases, it's a similar thing that is going on, which is that the real work is being done by instances of compute with GPU resources in the cloud, and the result is being compressed and streamed to the user. And what the user's hardware is doing is just displaying a pixel stream and then sending those inputs, whatever they're doing, that is the controls that they're manipulating for the game. Those inputs are then being fed back to the cloud, back to those instances that are running to perform the operations based on those inputs. So, in short, pixel streaming of games. That's the thing that gets you much broader reach, much able to function on much less capable hardware. As long as the hardware has connectivity with sufficient bandwidth and can render that pixel stream, that's it. That's all you need. So then the challenge is going to be for these businesses and industries that are providing compute capacity for these purposes. Now, that stuff is going to have to grow, increase the amount of reach that it has, this infrastructure. Currently, we see it functioning in various regions, in large cities, in places that are well connected and that are relatively close to data centers that these companies have been able to deploy to. But yeah, if we're going to see that a lot more in the future, it's going to be a sort of a shifting, like a tectonic shift in where do we put the computational workload. Do we continue to put it into the individual devices that people purchase, or do we more and more start to put it into the cloud and have it be more like, subscribe pay for service to utilize those resources, whereas your device is a very cheap, very low cost device that's really just meant to be a thin client to that stuff.
Absolutely. And that brings me to one other question regarding hardware. While we understand that when it comes to 100% immersion, Metaverse is all about that experience that I spoke about initially, the ability to move between worlds. While you're sitting at the comfort of your couch, being able to move different scenes. So at this point in time, we understand that Meta, kind of sold close to 15 million headsets, but that's not even 1% of the population. So how are companies, again, they're also working on advanced tech like EMG, graphic input devices. Very interesting. But what will be the driving factor ultimately? There's also a poll if users can respond to that. What do they think in terms of what will be the driving factor for the metaverse in completion?
Personally, I think that augmented reality is going to be the biggest driving factor for what we would call the metaverse in the future, because it has the most use cases, and it's got the greatest potential to be something that people would want to carry around with them everywhere they go, and could, in that sense, someday supplant possibly the smartphone, right? Like it could become the new portable computing method, preferred method. And, that's not as practical for pure VR headsets such as we see now to be, ubiquitous like that. There's also the question of overcoming some of the physical limitations of VR with regards to people's physical reactions to it, and how it affects their motion sensitivity, and you're trying to fool the human brain into believing in a reality that's not physically present. That presents a lot of challenges, and who knows how long it will take us to overcome ultimately those barriers to adoption. I think that AR, ultimately, if AR can become something that you wear instead of have to hold in your hand, that's where I think we'll see probably the most likely explosion of adoption is in that space, in my opinion.
Great. Let's move on to the next topic, in the interest of time. So let's talk about privacy and security. One of the important aspects I'm sure everybody at this point in time would be worrying about, while different companies are coming up with different platforms. At this point in time, there are, for this landscape, there are no rules or expectations in terms of, or a governing body per se, in terms of what a metaverse should do and the basic minimum things that it should have. So, however, in the future, would we see a governing body, taking care of everything? Would there be a single source which would be controlling what is happening and what is not within the space?
Well, maybe. I think what would be ideal is if people could own their data securely, give permission to other entities to use their data for whatever purpose. So if a given business wants to make use of your personal information and they have a use case where it makes sense for them to do so, and you'll benefit from that, then it's your decision. You say, okay, yeah, I'll give you access to this portion of my personal data so that you can give me those benefits. Now, governments and law enforcement are going to need special access to some of this because they do need to enforce laws. So again, yes, you have ownership of your data, but as a citizen and someone who's also interested in seeing, hopefully seeing laws properly enforced, you will give up access to your personal information with proper authority, with proper, like having a warrant, being subpoenaed, that kind of thing, right? But so in a sense, it's like cooperative, I think, between the ownership of data, personal ownership of data, and then what other entities need in terms of access to that data, hopefully there's a cooperative relationship there such that the individual's rights are being protected, and it's like again in a way that's kind of automated and is enforced through permissionless and secure methods that are less vulnerable to being exploited because of corruption or deceitful practices by other entities.
Right. So one last thing on privacy before we conclude. Let's talk about privacy in general. If you look at all these VR headsets today, when I looked at this data, it kind of scared me, to be very honest, in terms of what is it that they can infer with the information that they can collect. So when I put on a headset, based on my facial attributes, high status, they'll users or companies can get to a point where they can understand my mental workload. That is something that I wouldn't even share with my family, maybe. So as long as this data is used for right purposes, as you rightly said, which is good, but how can companies build that trust in the users, saying that your data is used right? Because companies like this headset is coming from companies like Meta or Facebook. In the past, there were a lot of backlashes in terms of how the data was exposed, and a lot of people went off Facebook completely. So how are companies planning to handle this?
Well, I don't know that companies are necessarily very seriously trying to handle this right now. Centralization and the way that capitalism works makes it so that they're incentivized to exploit data as best they can, as far as they think they can get away with it. And a lot of times, what really drives change there is lawsuits. If they end up having to spend money battling against complaints about what they're doing, or if a federal, body comes down on them and says, hey, we're not going to let you keep doing this, and they have to pay fines and penalties and do whatever, that's going to motivate them to change. But I think that, like in the ultimate future and vision for what smart contracts can do and what the blockchain can do for our world is to increase transparency. So basically, first of all, secure your data so that you are offering permission transparently for what can be done with your data, and then create transparency in terms of an audit trail for what actually does get done with your data. Like the better we can track this and the more transparently the tracking is available, you yourself can run an audit, or you can hire somebody to run an audit on what was done with your data. And it makes it much harder than for companies that would like to exploit the data without disclosing what they're doing. Make it as difficult as possible for them to do that and get away with it and be able to dodge legal enforcement.
All right. So that brings us to the end of the session. I know we ran over by 8 minutes. So one last thing. For companies, if you can go to the next slide. For companies at this point in time who are trying to get into the metaverse, what would your recommendation be? Building their own metaverse, or choosing one of these marketplaces that are available like Decentraland, Sandbox? Because some of the companies are doing this and some of the companies are doing that. So probably that could be a confusion too.
I think if you're not a large player who's got a lot of capital, you're going to have to approach it from a point of view of using what's out there already. Get your hands on existing tools and look at existing examples, especially where it's open, where you can see how they're building what they're building, or get good examples from some of these players and see how they're doing it and follow their lead. But yeah, as much as possible, build off of stuff that other people have already made and that you can leverage. Because I would give the same advice really to like a game studio that's trying to start up and say, don't build your engine yourselves. Go use Unreal or go use Unity. Use some existing tools and an engine that can already do almost anything that you need done. Try to find those tools. Look for those opportunities to use what's available.
Absolutely. All right. So one last thing before we actually move on to question and answers. So it's definitely not a question of whether or not we'll be able to achieve the vision that Meta spoke about. Metaverse is already here, and it's now. In fact, it is only going to grow or evolve to the vision that industry is talking about at this point in time. For example, platforms like Fortnite, they started as a game, and today they're a huge platform. Arranging concerts or even Roblox. Every possible brand today has a presence in the Roblox. So yeah, and it is also believed that in the coming years, every company will have a presence in the metaverse, like how we have websites today. All right. So one last thing, if you guys have any questions, and this is for the attendees, if you guys have any questions related to the metaverse or would like to explore any use cases or discuss, you can write to us on the email ID that is displayed on the screen. We can move on to the question and answers if you have any questions. And there's also a poll if you can respond to that. Okay, let's probably move on to the questions now. One of the questions that we have is regarding interoperability, a topic that we had to skip given the time. How are companies planning to handle the interoperability? Unless you kind of handle the interoperability, the metaverse is not complete. The larger vision of metaverse is for you to move from one platform to other platform. How are companies planning to achieve that?
Well, the primary thing that's going on right now is companies gathering together to discuss standards they can implement around. So there's the Open Metaverse initiative. There's a handful of these, and the discussions are mostly centered around right now around formats for data, like if we all agree that this small set of formats is what we are all going to support in our various products, then you can then start agreeing that when you give something to a user, when a user buys something, what they're going to get is going to include that format in the probably off-chain metadata, and if that format is adhered to, then these other companies that also agreed that they're going to support that format, it'll be that much easier for them to actually provide utility for that asset, right? Because they can read the format, they can bring it into their particular product, and then they can say, yeah, I'm able to display this for you and give you some utility from it. So yeah, that's a lot of it.
Right. And there's also another question around where do you see metaverse in the education sector?
Well, education is interesting because right now, to a large degree in many countries, it's either provided by or subsidized by the government in the interest of kind of lifting everybody's boat, right? So I think that there's an opportunity there to put educational materials and the opportunity to take classes, the opportunity to learn from others, put some of that onto the blockchain and organize it, kind of not exactly a DAO, but organize it in a way that's decentralized and give people greater access to a wider amount of information kind of from one source. If the metaverse is going to be one unified sort of world, and you're going to sort of like the internet itself, just you can search for things and find them, and you can say I'm interested in learning about this topic, then all the people or institutions who are capable of providing support for educating on that topic can all kind of be publishing their presence in one general ledger of tracking that information, so that it's easier to find them, it's easier for them to connect with the people who are interested in learning.
All right. One last question. How do you think people will solve these pumps and dumps of NFTs? It's stopping new users from being interested in the metaverse.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Right now, and in the recent history, there's a lot of exploitation a lot of cases of people putting up scams and taking advantage of people's ignorance. So, a lot of this is going to be the public needs to learn. We need to educate and help educate the public on what can they say is a legitimate use of NFTs? What are the things that are really valuable in NFTs and should be looked at as long-term gains for businesses and for customers in this space, rather than how can I get rich quick? And because as long as people continue to look at it as a get rich quick opportunity, they're going to get scammed.
Okay. And there's also another question. Do you see any possibility of using Metaverse in the finance and accounting department?
Sure. I think that, finance and banking and accounting are places where this stuff is super important, because as the concept of the blockchain, as the concept of smart contracts, it becomes more and more adopted by large institutions, you start to see the possible benefits in automation for accounting and for finance that infrastructure can provide. And what's good about that is that gives you some ways to avoid corruption and abuse, or greatly decrease it.
I guess one last question let's take. Can you please throw some light on possible revenue generating opportunities for consulting companies on Metaverse?
Right now, the space is pretty hot. There's a lot of investment going on. There's a lot of venture capital. It's a good time to be coming up with ideas about what you would do if you were trying to offer something in the NFT space or in the blockchain space or in the Metaverse space in general. There's a lot of investment going on still, even though the market, has gone down. There's still a lot of investment going on and a lot of excitement around the whole topic. So come up with your ideas, talk about them with trusted people, and then go find an avenue to get a grant or to get some kind of investment. A lot of companies like ours are planning to set up or have already set up grant funds where we will collect ideas and then offer, run contests for ideas and then offer grants for the best ideas that we see.
All right. There are a few more questions, but we'll try and respond to them at a later point, probably via an email or something. But thank you so much, Sheikh, and thanks to all the audience, for staying till the end of the event. Do let us know, as I said, in case if you have anything in terms of exploring use cases or doing workshops, you can always reach out to us on the email ID that is displayed on the screen. Sheikh, once again, thank you so much for all the insights. I'm sure it's a very interesting session. Thank you.